Local productions on QTV are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello everyone, welcome to Junia Doan's The Spark. I'm Junia Doan and thank you for joining us. With me today is Dr. Samuel Shaheen, Professor of Surgery and Chair of Surgical Disciplines for CMU College of Medicine and President of Shaheen Development. Welcome, Dr. Shaheen. You're heavily involved with the new medical school. How is it different in concept or development than when you went to school some few years ago?
Well, I think that medical education is changing, and having a brand new medical school through CMU has given us a great opportunity to change how medical students are being educated. And specifically, we're introducing patients to them earlier in the curriculum, so that in the first and second years of medical school, they're really sort of learning in both around disease-centered, so case-based learning around disease processes and organ systems, which is much different than how we learned, which was basically the next chapter of the textbook.
Yeah.
And also immersing young students in patient care activities and getting the nuts and bolts of physical diagnosis and history taking early on in the medical school education.
Oh, I really like that idea.
Yeah.
Do you find certain personality types are more suited to be doctors and certain personality types less?
Well, I think that that also is changing. There was a large focus around just didactics and just book smarts, right? Historically, I think now it still requires a high level of intelligence, but at the same time, people have to have the emotional intelligence and be able to really have relationships with their patients and make connections so that patient care can be seamless and that patients are treated in a way that you'd want to be treated by any sort of relationship, and that's becoming more and more important, I think, not less so.
How do you teach that?
That's a difficult difficult thing to do. I think a lot of it has to be a spirit of service. You know, there's a lot of times during education where the question comes up as, you know, is it service over education? Meaning that are you providing more patient care, and are we as educators being more concerned about the service to the patient rather than education? And what I try to inspire in the students is that you're going into a service career. You know, there is no other career much like similar to ours in terms of the level of commitment, of the spirit of volunteerism, the responsibility that's been entrusted to you as a physician. And so I think it's really meaningful that people remember how much they wanted to be a doctor when they began their medical education versus 10 or 15 years after they've completed it, and still feel as fortunate as we are to be able to take care of people.
What gives the patient confidence in a physician?
I think it's the individual's, the ability to communicate in a way that the patient understands, and also to have an appearance that you would expect of a professional. I think the patient probably makes his or her first opinion based on how you look and how articulate you are in terms of communicating the message and being able to communicate at whatever level is required. If I'm speaking to another physician, I could speak at one level. If I'm speaking with someone that isn't used to medical terminology, then I'm going to use analogies that would be more like talking about a plumbing system rather than the vascular supply, or, you know, something like that. So I think it really is being available, being able to communicate and educate that person so that the decisions made in their treatment plan are together. I think those are key elements of being a good physician.
That's so interesting to me, and what's interesting about it is, from a physician's point of view, what makes for a good patient?
A good patient is one that is compliant and does what he or she is supposed to do in terms of, you know, maintaining good diet, exercise regimen to maintain a good, healthy lifestyle, to try not to overly indulge in alcohol or in other things that can cause harm to the individual. So a patient that's engaged in their treatment plan. And so those things, I think, are critically important to that doctor-patient relationship.
How do you hire? What do you look for in staff for your personal office?
Well, we're certainly interested in people that are outgoing and that communicate nicely with the patients and treat the patients the way that we as physicians feel that they should be treated, and that we're really at their service. We're servicing that patient, and so customer service is really important. We try to instill that in the hiring process, and also the quality of care, right? The professionalism from the start of the experience to the end of the experience, and that's CMU as an institution is new to the medical business of treating patients, but as a part of medical education, many people don't realize that it is all about the patient experience that allows us and affords us the ability to teach medical students and resident physicians so that we have a well-rounded, excellent physician when they're completed with their training.
You know, I'm thrilled to hear you talk about a sense of service, because personally speaking, that's what I look for and try to live. But I look for it particularly in every, certainly in the medical area.
Sure.
And that's hard to find. I don't know what happened. But I'm glad to hear that you're, no, I really am super glad that you're trying to instill that in the doctors to be, and I hope nurses. Now, in your own practice, so much has changed in surgery. Where are you now? What do you anticipate in the next few years?
Well, it's really interesting, Junia. The technology is just fantastic. You know, we're doing operations today with little incisions the size of my thumb and pinky that we used to have to use a formal incision for. Clearly, the hands of the surgeon are on the outside of the patient and sometimes at a robotic console rather than in the patient, as was done historically. There are still times when the more invasive approach is necessary to save lives or to do complex procedures that can't be done with the smaller incision. But we're doing things that 10 or 15 years ago were not even thought of with those small incisions. So, as an example, pancreatic cancer, which is one of the more difficult tumors to treat, we're treating right here in the Great Lakes Bay region with a robotic resection of the pancreatic head that isn't being done at institutions like the University of Michigan or Henry Ford Hospital. So there are cutting-edge technologies being employed here in the Great Lakes Bay region that we should be very, very proud of and more people should know about.
How did it come here?
Well, it's
rather
all
than a major teaching institution.
It's all about your selection of faculty members and surgeon faculty and who's being trained where and when, and how well you're able to recruit those individuals to the community. So we're in a position, because of the medical school and because of programming, people want top-notch physicians and surgeons want to be a part of the medical education process, much like if you were at a medical school down south in the state or in other parts of the country, some of the top physicians are in institutions that have that medical student resident education continuum.
So recently I met a young man, a surgeon actually, who started a company, and he claimed, and this is based, I'm coming around to the question based on what he told me, that the first 100 surgeries you do are full of errors, and his company his app allows you to practice, so you can start with surgery, surgery 1, 2, or 3, and start ahead of the game, so to speak. Do your 100 practice thing. How do surgeons practice before they go out in the world?
First and foremost.
And is that a necessary app these days?
I'm not sure. I don't know the app, so I can't comment on it, but I can tell you that the surgical training programs are very rigorous, that you are doing components of the operation with the teaching surgeon throughout your training program, which is the longest of the training programs, which is about 5 years. And much of the education today is done through simulation. So simulation is essentially doing the operation with haptic and video assistance so that you're able to actually practice the operation during your training program. So again, I can't comment on the app, but I think that the educational experience today and how much supervision trainees are receiving is far in excess of what it was historically. So I'm not as concerned about
am I putting words into your mouth?
I'm not being as concerned about
those 100 experiments.
Right, because you're going to be doing that throughout your training program. So I think that the training program and the graduation requirements require someone to sign off on your ability to do those procedures. So I think
what I like about medicine today, it sort of has a sense of entrepreneurship because the changes are so great.
There have been fantastic changes in almost every area of medicine, and that's why for young people it's a really exciting time. There's things being done in immunology and cancer treatment and genetics that weren't even thought of 15 or 20 years ago. And every year that goes by we're seeing remarkable breakthroughs that are changing therapies, and so it's a great time to be in medicine and in medical education in particular. And that's why our region, in the Great Lakes Bay region, has a fantastic opportunity to embrace the College of Medicine and really enhance it and make sure that it's successful.
Is there a complementary medicine, I don't want to call it medicine, segment to the training? Acupuncture, massage, all that kind of stuff?
Not so much, not to my knowledge, but just in a community like ours that has 4 pretty significant healthcare institutions and health systems, we should figure out a way to collaborate and cooperate around education because it's so impactful, not just for the physician pipeline, but from an economic impact perspective and for all other reasons of enhancing the quality of care delivered. And an important byproduct is that you're creating a physician pipeline that will then come and work and take care of the residents of this region, which is obviously very important.
I read so much about hospital-acquired infections. And I understand the Israelis are really good at keeping those down, and they're really simple protocols. Is that something that's emphasized in this new medical school? It's not exactly training the physician, but it's training the physician to be mindful that some of the errors that are off the table don't present by not having a carefully followed regime.
Sure, I think overall patient safety and health safety and patient care quality and hospital-based quality is on everyone's radar screen. So I think you can be reassured that that's top of mind and highest priority for not only the physicians, the medical students, the resident physicians, but hospital administration, nursing, all of the people that are helping to make these hospitals work. So
what is the satisfaction of medicine for you?
I would say that my passion is medicine. I'm passionate about a lot of things, but I feel as though medicine is a part of my my makeup, and it is because no matter what, if you allow yourself to just remember that you wanted to become a doctor more than anything, and that the patient that's calling you or that requires you at their bedside is in need. And if the patient needs you, you shouldn't be grumpy. You shouldn't bring in your work problems or your social problems. You should be attentive to that patient and be able to deliver the best care possible and reassure that patient and comfort that patient, and then do your best to make sure that they have an excellent outcome. And I think that's what I try to keep that and maintain that passion for patient care in my overall life, and I try to treat my communities, our communities, the same way. And instead of healing somebody one at a time with my 2 hands, you can heal a community and try to move an entire community or a population base, which is tens of thousands or potentially hundreds of thousands of people at a time. So I think that having care for one another is an extension of my feeling of commitment to an individual patient. And so those things are really important, and I'm hopeful that we can help to teach medical students to be more committed, not only to their patients, but to their communities. Many times, especially historically, you don't see a lot of physician participation in not-for-profit boards and those kinds of things. Well, I think a lot of physicians think, well, I'm giving of my time
Yes.
at work. Well, from my perspective, that's not enough. You're doing what you do at work because that's your career and your profession. But to make your community better is inherent in what we do as individuals, as human beings. And as a physician who has so much responsibility, we should extend that to our communities to ensure the health of our communities.
Now, you're involved with the family business, the real estate business.
Sure.
What part of yourself is differently employed there? Do you switch to a different aspect of yourself, or when you're doing that?
I think the tools are a little bit different, but you know, just like with anything, you have to assess the situation, right? When you're assessing a patient, you assess the patient. When you assess any kind of structured development or any opportunity where you're going to use those other tools and resources, it's a similar process, but I think it has to be a little bit more grand with respect to vision and to make decisions that are impactful and can be transformational for communities. You know, we've seen great opportunities in Bay City with the Uptown Project, really transforming the Bay City riverfront, and that's only just beginning. So I think you can expect to see a transformative type of approach of that project to the rest of the greater Bay City community, and really as a regional asset. It's really the only community of the three that has a vibrant riverfront, and so that offers us something different than what Midland offers, and Midland and Bay City offer something different than what Saginaw offers. And so as a region, I truly have you know, drank the juice on the Kool-Aid and the regional concept, because it's fun for me to go to Midland and have dinner at Grazie downtown, and then go to Real Seafood in Uptown and be out on a deck watching the boats, sailboats go by.
The variety.
And then there's great cultural opportunity in Saginaw, and the marketplace downtown is offering people exposure to things that we never had before in the region, so it's quite fun.
So who has the vision, you or your brother? Or you're still living off your dad's blueprint?
Well, you know, I think it's hard.
Or maybe your mom's blueprint.
Yeah, mom and dad certainly inspired us to be committed to community and to each other. I think Dad was visionary with his ability to see opportunity in buildings that other people thought were, you know, useless. And so his ability to reuse and his ability to have those kinds of visions were instilled, I think, in my brother Pete and I. I'm not sure what my brother would say, but I think we both share that kind of vision. I tend to have fairly big thinking, big thoughts about what we can do in our communities. But we share it, I think, and the nice thing is that when you're fortunate enough and blessed to work with your brother, you can then, you know, I can maintain my medical aspirations and do the things in medical education and do the other things, and have somebody that is there day in, day out, that takes care of the things that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. And so we're really blessed. I think we complement each other a great deal, and I have a tremendous amount of love and respect for him. And so I would say, to answer your question, I think we share in that vision. He teases me sometimes that I'm a big thinker, and then we sort of go back and say, well, wait a minute, we didn't think big enough.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's fun. And Mom, you know, Mom's still with us. So, you know, Dad passed away 5 years ago, and Mom is who gives us sort of our inspiration for quality and for things that look nice and make people feel good in what we do. And she's been, you know, dedicated to our communities for decades.
Yes, she has.
On the arts and culture scene and all areas. And so we've been blessed to be raised with loving parents and a nice family, and we hope to instill that in the future generation as well.
What did they raise you with? What kind of values did they nag you about?
I think mostly work ethic and sense of family and community. I think would be the biggest values, and that no one else is going to do it for you. You know, it's kind of like the corporate culture where there's a corporate town, and the corporation does all of the philanthropy and all of the projects get done that way. Well, you know, that doesn't exist anymore in Saginaw. So the big corporation, General Motors, left, right? And with it went 35,000 manufacturing jobs. Well, that's a big lift, right, to overcome. And I think the people of the community should feel very proud with what they've been able to do in this last 20 years, considering that there is no corporate, there's no corporate underwriter or sponsor for a lot of initiatives, and it's been grassroots. And so I think that just knowing that and being raised in a way that you have to do for yourself, no one else is going to do it for you, I think is a really important lesson to learn early on. And I think they taught us that the only way to do that was with hard work. And so people joke that I have 2 jobs, and I do have 2 jobs, and I spent twice as much time than most people dedicated to those 2 jobs. So it's a lot of fun, and it's at the same time very, very rewarding.
Do you attribute that to high energy too, as well as interest and capability?
Yeah, I think you have to have, I would term it passion. Be passionate for what you're doing. If you're passionate for taking care of patients, if you're passionate about economic development, if you're passionate about philanthropy and not-for-profits, then you're going to, make sure that you use every ounce of your being to be successful in those areas. If you're just sort of paying lip service, then it's not going to happen, right? So when arts organizations are struggling, if you roll up your sleeves and you make them successful, then that takes hard work, it takes dedication, but it takes passion for that, initiative or that organization.
Do you have to deal with, I don't mean deal with people exactly, do you vibrate with people differently in the arts world versus the real estate world versus the medical world? Do they hear different music?
I think so, but I think at the end of the day it's all about relationship. So it's really, as long as you can develop a relationship, then you tend to vibe the same way, right? And so if you're working with somebody in business and you develop the relationship, then that relationship works. And the same thing with arts, and it's the same thing with taking care of an individual patient. For that patient to feel comfortable with you, you have to have a relationship. And if they say, Dr. Shaheen was very kind and caring, that's good, because they're going to say that to somebody else. If they say, boy, that guy was mean and didn't talk to me and never smiled, and then that's going to be a completely different experience. So I think as long as you can establish relationships with whomever or whatever you're doing, and you're passionate about it, I think it can be really positive and make you feel good about what you're doing in your day-to-day life. If you're not passionate about it, it feels like work. But if you're passionate about it, it's fun. It's something that you can't see yourself doing anything else or be anywhere else. And I certainly could live other places. I was fortunate enough to train at some of the best medical institutions in the country, and I chose to come back home. And I call Saginaw Bay City and Midland my home, and I spend at least a day in every part of this region every week. And so I couldn't think of a better place to be spending my life or raising a family, and I'm fortunate enough to have my mother and my brother and my sister not too far away, and so it's a wonderful opportunity.
How do you build a relationship with a person?
I think that's a good question. I don't know if I've ever reflected upon it, Junia, but I think that being open enough to listen is a key element, and making sure that you treat somebody like you'd want to be treated, just the old adage. And I would say that those are probably the key elements, is just be kind and respectful, and if somebody needs something, help them. And usually if you do that for other people, they do that for you, and that's how you determine who you want to be with, and who you want to be friends with, and who you want to work with, and what organizations you want to work within. And so I think that it all is a great circumstance when you can be have those kinds of relationships. They got to give back, though, right? It can't be one way. So
I find trust is important to establish. Be straight. Do what you said you would do in a timely manner.
You're right.
Well done.
You're right. Absolutely.
And with a gracious attitude.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Facilitates a lot.
Right.
Everybody grows up in your times. Their times for your children are different now. So what do you feel needs to be emphasized as you and your wife raise your children?
It's a great question. I think that the most important thing is to not give up on old ways. Reading from a book is nice, to read from a book rather than just an iPad. Finding time to be self-fulfilled rather than needing a video game or some other activity to have that person, that child, be self-fulfilled and self-interested and not, bored without an electronic, or I think ensuring that young women know that the sky's the limit and that they should be strong and they should be confident. And I tell my oldest that there is no boy that's better than you. You will be better than the boys. So, education, family, commitment to community. I think I'm going to try to teach them the same way I was raised, and try not to allow it to get too changed because of technology and everybody being so busy and so many activities. And I think if we can keep the basics together, I think we'll be really, really successful. And I just hope that my wife and I can do as well with our children as her parents and our parents hopefully did with us. So,
thank you. So we have a lot to say in summary here. Be of service. Give the best of yourself at all times. Try and live your passion. But if you can't do that, check your own attitude. No matter what, you go in with the best side of yourself. Always, always know that you have endless energy, but how you use it and relationships with people really count. And you build that through being real, being reliable, being positive, being available, and I would say also being honest. But in any case, in raising children, eternal virtues really are it. So thank you.
To contact Junia, send her an email at juniadonsthespark@gmail.com. For more information, program schedules, and news about future guests, go to www.juniadonsthespark.com. Thank you for joining us. See you next time on Junia Doan's The Spark.
Local productions on QTV are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.